Chapter 23 takes you from the end of the Civil War to and through Reconstruction, all right? So the end of the Civil War through Reconstruction. Now, we know that the Civil War ended in April of 1865, right? So in April of 1865, after approximately 4 years of fighting, Lee surrenders at Appomattox, and then subsequently most of the Southern armies surrender and the Civil War is over. And so when we talked about this in class, what we said was, look, there are lots of challenges now. Now that after the Civil War was over, there are numerous sort of challenges that the country faces, and the biggest challenge that the country faced was the status, the condition, and the circumstances of the former freed slaves, who were collectively called the freedmen. Right? Now, so what would become of those people? And in your textbook, they talk a little bit, and we didn't really talk about this in class, but you might want to look at it. They talked a little bit about their stories. Okay, they were slaves, now they're free. What issues did they specifically face? In class, we kind of just collectively lumped them into a group of people and said, here they are, what's going to happen to them, what's going to become of them. Oh, incidentally, what did we say was the government's most tangible and immediate responses to the direct needs of the former freed slaves? So the government does respond to their needs, their problems, their challenges in a direct way. Do you remember what we said that was? Anybody besides the instructor remember what we said was the direct response of the government to the immediate problems of the freed slaves? Maybe this question isn't, because no one is anxious to respond. So maybe this question, go ahead, dear Jessica. Go ahead, McMasters.
Is it the Freedmen's Bureau?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We're all familiar with the Freedmen. The Freedmen's Bureau, when you think of that, Danielle, what do you think of? The Freedmen's Bureau was to address the problems of the release, the freed slaves. What do you think of when you think of the Freedmen's Bureau? They provided social services. The intention was to help to incorporate the former slaves into the larger Southern society, and this was a formidable challenge to arrange, employment. But one of the things about the Freedmen's Bureau, one of the biggest roles, and there's a lengthy discussion, and this is also something that you find in your book, is one of their biggest roles was to build schools. To educate African American children and adults. And they had some level of success in that. Now, we did say that the White South resented the Freedmen's Bureau. And that sort of goes to this issue, which is also discussed in your book. The White South, in the aftermath of the Civil War, by and large, the former Confederates, were not sorry for what they did. They did not feel as if their actions were unjustified, and if anything, they were sorry that they lost. Now, the African American slaves, the former African American slaves, are going to be central to the issue of Reconstruction. And when we talked about Reconstruction, we kind of divided it into two parts: presidential Reconstruction and congressional Reconstruction. Presidential Reconstruction begins with Lincoln in December of 1863. Now, what was Lincoln's plan called? And tell me any aspect of it. Does anybody remember what? Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
The 10% plan?
It was called the 10% plan. Does anybody remember any aspect? Mabe, do you remember any aspect of that plan at all?
That 10% of the population of the state had to agree to be loyal to the Union and then apply to the estate.
Yes. So, dear Mabe, you are saying to me that what sparked your memory was 10% plan. Something had to involve 10%, right? So it was 10% of the population had taken an oath of the allegiance to the Constitution. Then that state could call a new constitutional convention, and write a new constitution, elect new officers, etc. Correct? Yes, go ahead.
It didn't require the states to allow Africans to vote.
Right. It did not mandate that African Americans, males, would be have to vote. It was up to the states, right? It was up to the states to do that. Was the 10% plan considered to be, you know, oppressive to the former Confederacy, or was it considered to be lenient? Oppressive or lenient? Go ahead, Courtney.
It was lenient.
Lenient, so much so that Congress, hey, who were the radical Republicans? We mentioned this faction of people called the radical Republicans, and they didn't like Lincoln's 10% plan very much. Who were they, Melissa, the radical Republicans?
A group that wanted to really punish the planner.
So you're saying the radical Republicans, dear Melissa, were Republicans, right?
Yeah.
Same party as Lincoln, but they disagreed with Lincoln in what area?
Reconstruction, how they wanted to punish, the healing versus justice.
Oh yes, we did talk about that, healing versus justice. So the radical Republicans were more likely to advocate healing, right? Or, you know, excuse me, justice. They were more likely to advocate justice. They wanted the white South punished. And part of punishing the white South was enfranchising, embracing African Americans who would become a part of the political situation in the South, correct? And so they didn't like Lincoln's 10% plan, too lenient. Their response to Lincoln's 10% plan was what? Does anybody remember? Yes.
The Wade-Davis bill?
The Wade-Davis bill. And you know, we talked a little bit about the Wade-Davis bill when we said that the Wade-Davis bill eventually dies in pocket veto. We did say this, that Lincoln and the radical Republicans were kind of in disagreement in the nature of Reconstruction. Lincoln wanting to welcome healing, maybe to expedite the end of the Civil War more quickly. The radicals wanting to punish the South. The issue of Reconstruction is unresolved at Lincoln's death. So Lincoln dies, Johnson takes over. Johnson is a Southern Democrat from Tennessee, and he kind of continues Lincoln's plan with some slight modifications. Now, remember that by December of 1865, under the Lincoln/Johnson plan, you know, the presidential Reconstruction sort of edicts, all 10 of the 11 Confederate states had done everything that they were supposed to do. You know, I mean, they had done everything that they were supposed to do. And in December of 65, you know, Johnson sort of proclaimed that Reconstruction was complete, that it was over, right? That, you know, these states had done everything that they wanted, you know, they were supposed to do. They had taken the oaths of allegiance. Johnson had pardoned a large number of ex-Confederates. You know, they had called constitutional conventions. They had elected new officers. They had addressed the issue of the former slaves. The last thing that had to happen was that the congressional delegations from these states had to take their seats in the United States House and the United States Senate. Now, the Republican-controlled House and Senate refused to seat these delegates. They were unhappy with elements of Reconstruction under the Johnson/Lincoln plan. Now, one of the things that they were unhappy with was the passage of state laws that were collectively known as the Black Codes. What were they? Taylor, tell the cyber audience that will be seeing this what the Black Codes were.
Black Codes were laws and regulations put in to make the African American people practically slaves without being enslaved.
So, Taylor, are you saying left unregulated, right, left undirected, the former Confederate states passed laws that kind of...
Ms. Titus, please call 5764. Ms. Titus, call 5764.
Passed laws that relegated African Americans to sort of a second-class citizenship?
Yes.
That they had some rights but not complete rights. They could marry, they could do things like that. They could own some level of property, but they didn't have free, they couldn't assemble, they couldn't own you know, firearms, they couldn't testify against whites. I mean, it was some level of subjugation, so close to slavery in some cases that white Northerners deeply resented it. Why would the white North resent the Black Codes? If we conceded that white Northerners were generally racially prejudiced, why would they be so upset that African Americans in the South, Kelly, were being discriminated against? Well, your friend knows. Jessica knows. Yes.
Because like all those people died to like give freedom to the African Americans, it was basically like making their deaths.
So this is a slap in the face to the Union Caucus.